Welcome back, everyone, to the House of Hustle podcast here on Sports Radio 810. We are presented, as always, by our friends at Charlie Hustle, where vintage gear is made fresh, as well as our friends at Capital Investment Management, providing financial and wealth management services. My name is Jarrett. I'm joined, as always, by Stephen St. John. And Stephen, we got a lot to cover today as we discuss college basketball offseason, NIL, and now we're making the turn to the NBA playoffs.
A lot of stuff going on with basketball. But again, and this has been an interesting discussion point over the past year or so or more since it started. But the transfer portal is so interesting to me because you have some coaches that hate it. You have some coaches that love it. You have some fans that hate it. You have some fans that love it. But you cannot deny the fact that it keeps college basketball in the headlines, and there is an element of excitement to it because it's just basically like NFL free agency, MLB free agency, and especially for a team like Missouri that did not win I don't know if you saw this, they didn't win a conference game last year.
Good reminder.
Normally in the past, you would think, well, it's 3 years away from getting back to where they need to be.
Right.
No. Now, maybe coaches don't like that because they don't get that extra time to be able to rebuild. It doesn't take all that time, right? Like Iowa State went winless, didn't they, before T.J. Otzelberger took over?
Yes.
And you can rebuild, you can reload, you could turn a program around in just one off season. And so for my purposes, I get it. I understand. It's like, say, when you were at Mizzou, right? We were given time to fall in love with Kim English and watch him develop over his 4 years at Mizzou. We were given time to fall in love with Marcus Denman. We were given time to fall in love with a guy like a Leo Lyons, and you think about what they were when they started and what they became by the time they left. That's a rarity now in college basketball. So I understand that criticism, but for a sports talk show host to basically have college basketball free agency, I love it because I always have something to talk about.
Well, and the amount of talent that goes into the portal now. Like when I was in school, you'd have a few fringe transfers that were end of bench players that maybe didn't get, an opportunity, that needed to go transfer and try to find a different school, a different fit for them. And now, I mean, you're talking teams' best players in Power 5 schools, Power 5 teams. There's a kid that was in the transfer portal for a third time, and he's going back to a school he was at 2 years ago.
Now you guys did get the Junkyard Dog.
Yeah,
that was a hell of a transfer.
That was a great transfer, and a guy came from Vanderbilt.
A guy like a Damari Carroll.
Damari coming from Vandy, but it's a different world. And to your point, like it's great for fans. I think there's a lot of maybe some negatives to it with NIL and portal that get discussed quite a bit. There are some positives, and the positives you hit on of you can change your program around in 1 year. A team like Missouri is the perfect example because they have to hit in the portal. They still need freshmen. They have a good freshman recruiting class coming in. But it's just different too for college coaches because they are right now, instead of going out and recruiting high school talent, which they would do in years past, it's heavy on you're in your office and it's NIL and it's portal and you're trying to get pieces, and you're still evaluating what players you want to bring into your program through the portal. But it's a great resource. There's mid-majors that are looking to elevate to a bigger level in the Power 5. We see a lot of those players. There's success stories there. There's guys that miss and they don't adjust well to a bigger level. And then there's those high-level recruits I saw where there's 13 McDonald's All-Americans that were in the transfer portal. That's wild. That's a lot of talent in high school that then moves on and is looking for a different opportunity. So it's just the way of the world right now in college athletics.
I give the example of Missouri trying to turn around a miserable season, but like Alabama lost a bunch of players and they just went to the Final Four.
Yep.
How many players left Duke? And so for some of the really successful programs, it's as simple as you're recruiting over some of these guys, and so they need to go someplace else. But also, let's just be honest. Some of these guys can get a better payday going closer to home.
Yeah.
And getting back to where they're a known commodity. And like even KU, look how heavy they are depending right now on the transfer portal because they didn't have the type of season that they wanted. And so it's every team is involved in this thing, and every team is having not only to decide about players from other programs, but deciding who you can keep. Because guess what? We hear stories about coaches running off players or suggesting they leave.
Yep.
It's a hell of a lot easier now to say, you know what, it's probably a good idea you go someplace else. And so not only are you evaluating those other players, it's a lot easier to break ties with the players you already have in your program. That sounds harsh, but that's the way it is.
That's the way it is. And I think, too, a lot of these coaches now understand the value of being honest with players, especially those that are on your – because roster retention is important. Player retention is important. But there's probably guys that coaches know, look, they probably should go to a different level or they're not going to have an opportunity here, and they're transparent with that. I think that's good. Players can take that the wrong way for sure. But you see some players that enter their name in the portal that it's probably good for them to maybe go explore somewhere else. Mo Diarra at NC State, left Mizzou and goes and has a good run. Probably was a better fit. Mizzou probably would want him back for sure for obvious reasons in terms of rebounding and those type of things. But there are reasons, as always, to put your name in the portal and go explore other options. There's also maybe some reasons where you're maybe, you're in the portal for some wrong reasons where you think you're going to get a payday, where you think, well, I had a great year. And I think sometimes I'm confused with players that put their name and they have a great year at a school that they already transferred to, and they're just looking for a payday, and they don't actually understand that money might not be out there. And then you're in the portal, and then you're in a bad spot. So, but you said something that was a great point too, of fans that are connected to players. And we talked a lot about the women's ratings and the men's ratings with the NCAA tournament. And you look at a lot of the women's programs, a lot of those players, they hang around. They stay at a school. And there is transferring. There are players that leave. But I think that's also a tough part just when you see the men's game, because there's so many players that are moving all over the place and going to different schools.
So this is, I think, an interesting question. I was discussing this with a fellow Mizzou fan. You'd be hard pressed to find another Division I team that will have more new players than Missouri going into next year. You have the 5-man freshman class, and they already have 4 in the transfer portal, and they're looking for more. They're looking for 1 or 2 more. So let's split the difference, say 1 more, they get a big guy. That's 10 new players all at once into a program.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And so that, and that's what, there's still not enough evidence to find out who's really good at it and who's not. But we've seen some coaches, they don't want to deal with it, and they've left. They've left college basketball. Whereas you have these other coaches that are going to excel at this, because the difference is not only going to be the players that you bring in, and that a lot of that has to do with the money. So it's maybe there's not so much time spent recruiting. It's more just evaluating and deciding who you want to spend the money on. But then the challenge, Jarrett, this is what I want you to comment on. Let's say it's 10 new players that's coming into a program like Missouri. How difficult is that to try to get these guys on the same page, build chemistry, find out what combinations work on the floor together? It's not always the 5 best players. It's the guys that work together the best. And to be able to do that all within the year to where you are peaking at the right time in March, hopefully going to the postseason.
Well, and too, with the portal just being never ending, this is going to keep going. Like, players are still putting their name in the portal right now. They'll be now. The good news is, with the new NCAA regulation and rules, all players, including grad transfers, if you're transferring, you have to be in the portal by May 1st. Like, that is the deadline. That didn't used to be the case. I think that's very important. And so players aren't just putting their name in the portal through, May, June, July, and you can kind of build your off-season program. You can kind of get going in May and into the summer period, which the summer period is so important in team building. There's so much going on with the weight room, guys together, spending time together on campus. Like, the summer period's really important to kind of build some of that chemistry, some of that culture that you want to do when you have so many new players. Let's take Arkansas, for example. Like, John Calipari gets the job at Arkansas. He doesn't have any players when he takes the job. There's literally no players on the roster. They're all in the portal or have left or have moved on and graduated. And so you look at you're building an entire new, and yes, he'll probably bring some of his recruits in, but you're still, it's a change. It's an adjustment. Calipari's going to have to adjust to, life in Fayetteville as a coach too. I mean, he's a human as well. So there's all these different factors. It's the biggest challenge, I think, with coaches when I talk to different coaches is, and just like free agency, when free agency starts, fans want to see you sign players right away, right? Let's go after this player and that player and that player. And yeah, you want to move quickly, but you also want to make sure you're taking time to evaluate, to do background checks, to do your intel, to make sure you're bringing in the right piece for your program.
Can
for
these
your team.
guys play together?
Can they play? Yeah, exactly. Personalities. We just interviewed Mike Anderson on our last podcast. And one of the things I appreciated so much about Coach A was the recruiting class that he brought in my first year that changed the program. It changed the entire direction of Mizzou basketball.
You guys grew together.
Exactly. And yes, there's 5 freshmen there. We added a couple guys, and we ended up having 7 seniors. That's not going to happen probably. Again, when you talk about, those guys staying together for 4 years, sometimes 5 years when you're a redshirt, those days are over. So it is the biggest challenge by far. And it's, coaches get compensated really well. This is now part of the job. And to what you said earlier, some of these older coaches, they didn't want to deal with that because of that piece right there, because they feel like they're having to start. They don't have guys that are staying around that can, be the experienced guys that can lead, that can teach as well. And that's what coaches miss, but it's still doable. And as I said this week when we were talking, you evolve or you die as a head coach told me that last weekend. And it's the truth. Like, you have to evolve with the times. And with that, how you coach, how you manage the season, all of that's changing and evolving with every coach.
All right. So let's start with Missouri.
Yeah.
It says they are in
they needed
transfer
this.
portal. They are in it.
They needed it.
So they already had a really impressive high school recruiting class on paper.
Yeah.
And now you add what they're doing in the transfer portal. And it's funny, now you're starting to see these combo rankings of freshmen and transfer portal, and they're ranked like in the top 10 of combo recruiting classes. But what also has been interesting is for a big chunk of this offseason, there's been no AD. They finally have an AD in Laird Veach. All right. Okay, we already have one Veach winning championships, Brett Veach. Now you got to do it, Veach. And so at least that's going to provide stability.
Yep.
And so hopefully for Dennis Gates,
Laird Veach also very cutting edge with NIL, which I think is great.
That's awesome.
Speaking of evolving.
That's right. And so so hopefully Dennis Gates is on good footing, good ground with the new AD. But you got to win, right? You got to get out there and you got to find some more talent. So they have the 5-man recruiting class coming in as freshmen. Then you got to go get the transfers. And they have 4 right now. And the 2 headliners, Mark Mitchell from Duke, the power forward from the Kansas City area, he comes home. And again, that's another example of, okay, Mark Mitchell, he's a guy at Duke, but Duke has a lot of guys, 4- and 5-star guys.
Sure.
Mark Mitchell coming home to the state of Missouri to play for the Missouri Tigers when he's a Kansas City guy, he's worth more NIL money to Mizzou.
No doubt.
He just is. And so there's your example. Like, why do you leave Duke for Missouri? Well, I'll tell you why. Yeah. Because you're a known commodity in this area and they want you. And so they bring back Mark Mitchell to this area. They go out and get an experienced point guard out of Iowa, an all Big Ten caliber point guard in Tony Perkins. And so you think, what do they need? Man, they need some strength down low. They need some rebounding. They need a point guard who can run the show. Did they? And look, more to come. They still need, I think, a post presence. They can protect the rim and rebound the basketball. But how important was it to get Perkins and Mitchell? What are they going to do? What kind of fit are they for Dennis Gates' system and what he was looking for?
Yeah, so let's start with Mark Mitchell. You mentioned the Kansas City ties, and it's kind of similar to Tamar Bates in some ways of being a highly talented high school kid. Goes to college, is a guy, with you talk about Mark at Duke. He played a role. He played close to 30 minutes a game.
And Bates and Mitchell played together before.
Exactly.
I've
There's a
seen
connection there with Run GMC. Yeah.
So that helps when you're able to get guys that have a history together, right?
Yep.
When we talk about that chemistry.
Well, and Tamar too, like he played with Trace Jackson Davis and that system and that style. Probably didn't get to showcase Tamar a ton. I feel very similar to Mark Mitchell, like Kyle Filipowski at Duke and those guards. Like he wasn't really a focal point of those systems. He'll have to be a focal point for Mizzou, which I think is also very intriguing in terms of the fit. I like Mark Mitchell just because when you look at his success in high school, a lot of it was based around his motor, his athleticism, his strength, his size. He's got a ton of just natural athletic tools that can compete in the SEC.
Gabe DeArmond said the minute they got him, he became the best player on Mizzou's roster. Is that right?
No question. Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think some of the freshmen have a chance to kind of take that mantle because they have some skill with some of these freshmen that are coming in. Now they're freshmen. It depends on how it goes starting out. But they got some talented freshmen coming in. But I think with Mark, you just get a guy that, number one, the defensive side of the ball had to be addressed for Mizzou. They really struggled defensively. They didn't have a stopper. They did not have a great, rebounder really at all. Their best rebounder was hurt for a majority of the year in Caleb Grill, and he was a guard. So when you look at his ability to impact the glass, and just the switchability piece in modern day basketball, like he's going to be able to switch and guard on the perimeter, moves his feet so well. Offensively, he's great off of guards without the ball. He can cut. He finishes at the rim really well, shot 54% from the field. A lot of that is dunks. A lot of that is just, cutting, being in the dunker spot, being in the right position to finish off guards. And you need a guy like that. You need a guy that has an understanding of instincts and being able to move without the ball. The shooting piece needs to come along. I think that's the biggest area of Mark Mitchell's game that's really a struggle. Mechanically, there's a lot of things to clean up with his shot. Hopefully Dennis Gates can maybe address some of these things, because if he could make a spot shot, a corner three, that helps their offense tremendously. But the big area that I love about Mark Mitchell coming to Dennis Gates' system is he excels in the open floor. He's great in transition. And Mizzou, with their NCAA tournament run, they were great in transition. That was a big part of their DNA. Mark Mitchell fulfills that. With Tony Perkins, the other addition, you mentioned the experience. Older guard, played in the Big Ten, tough downhill driver, about 6'3", 6'4", out of Indianapolis. Averaged 14 points a game last year. Iowa's offense is definitely, free-flowing as well. It's not to the tempo and the pace probably of Dennis Gates' offense, but you look at a guy that averaged close to 4.5 assists per game, doesn't turn the ball over. I think that's a big thing, is the assist to turnover, something to really look at. He almost doubled his assist to turnover, that's a great sign. When you have a point guard, older guard, takes care of the ball, he can score it. He likes to get to the free throw line. I think the 3-point shooting, he shot 33% a few years back. That's usually his average. He dipped in terms of his percentage under 30% from three. Can he make shots? That's what he's going to have to prove. But again, a good fit. You're finding one of the more experienced point guards in the transfer portal. Like, there was no question when he put his name in, he was at the top of the list. If you need to find a point guard, he's the guy. And Mizzou addressed that and identified that.
So you mentioned the freshman coming in, talented and skilled, but there's a fine line here.
Yeah.
Right? Because I saw Kansas lost a top 50 kid yesterday. They decommitted.
Yep.
In the past, you could say, okay, we've got these freshmen. Maybe they're not ready, but their ceiling's very high. We got to baby them, and they can work their way into getting some minutes. Now, I'm not saying all freshmen, but some freshmen, if they don't get playing time right away, well, then there you go, transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
And so how difficult is that to be able to toe that line to where you are relying on older players like Mark Mitchell and Tony Perkins because you need that quick turnaround. You'd like to be able to get 2 or 3 years with these kids in the freshman class, but if they don't play right away, they got so many people in their ear, and you got NIL offers from other schools, you don't get a chance to develop them, so maybe you got to give them minutes early that you don't want to just to keep them in the program. That could drive a coach crazy. Right.
And I think that's what's lost in where we're at right now with the transfer portal and NIL is player development and guys sticking around. Guys understanding now that, well, I can just go somewhere else and play right away. I mean, it's great for the athlete for sure, and NIL's here to stay. There's no question. I mean, players getting paid is great. But when you look at, in terms of like freshmen coming in, what I think is I think intriguing and impressive with Coach Gates is they went 0-19 in league play when you add in the conference tournament game, and they haven't had any decommitments from those freshmen. They've been locked in. They've been committed. You look at Anar Boateng, who's gone to a lot of these different, national events with some of the best players in the country. He's wearing Mizzou gear. He's dialed in. And I think that's what's exciting is the trend right now is you go 0-19, you start to fear like, wait, are these guys going to decommit? And they haven't had any of that. And I think that speaks to Coach Gates and just the man he is. I think the respect he draws and how good he is on the recruiting front of just being a head coach that I think really understands modern day basketball and understands what college athletics is right now, and has been very upfront about being at the cutting edge of analytics. Number one, he's a very analytically driven head coach, and NIL as well. To your question though, what I think it is going to be the biggest challenge for Coach Gates, knowing the pressure is a little bit on him, right? In terms of having the season he had last year, is he likes to play a lot of guys. He likes to have different rotations. He does kind of put his plan in place for each game in terms of, you don't know, sometimes, player X off the bench is going to be starting a game. Sometimes a starter that's started for 3 weeks comes off the bench. You see that quite a bit with just his lineups. How does that work with some of these talented freshmen coming in and with guys like Mark Mitchell and Tony Perkins who are older that should be shoo-in starters? What does that look like for some of these other freshmen like Boateng, like Marcus Allen, like Peyton Marshall, those type of guys? That remains to be seen, but that creates competition, and that's a good thing when you talk about the summer and the fall period.
And the people that are responsible for the money, NIL, if there's a certain amount of money paid to a player and he's not seeing the floor, then you have to answer to other people.
Absolutely.
You don't want to hear that, but that's the truth.
Great point. Yep.
Absolutely. So then maybe when you go back to that person or that booster, or hey, we need money for this guy, like, well, I gave you this much for that guy and he barely even played.
Yeah.
Or he's already gone. So why should I give you more now? It's mind-boggling.
Right. To your point, like what we've been talking about with free agency, like it's almost like a donor and a booster that are giving money to NIL. It's almost like they have the player rights. like if you would see in pro sports. I mean, because they are, they're giving money to NIL and it is going to a collective. They're very vocal about, does this go to football? Does this go to basketball? And it's good on the part of the collective at these institutions of making sure they're handling that the communication which is a big job with the donor base, with the athletic department, and then ultimately having the coaches understand what's available. Where are their resources? And I think that's the good thing is the trust that at Mizzou, at least being at the forefront of NIL, has been great. You've seen it in football and basketball recruiting, and I think that's important too for football and basketball, but also understanding that these coaches, they don't want to lead with money. They want to make sure they're talking to players and their inner circles, and they're understanding that what they're getting is a player that loves to play, that loves the game, that wants to compete, that's tough, that's smart, that is going to buy in to winning. Like that all still matters in building a team. And I've heard stories of coaches that they get on a Zoom with a player and the player only wants to talk about money. And they'll walk from those players because the coaches just don't want to deal with that. And you hear that all the time as well. So that's what's so fascinating about this NIL portal world is it just depends on the play. It just depends on the experience. It depends on the inner circle. It depends on where they're coming from. What was their money and package the last time? Was it a certain amount of money in a collective? And there's better opportunities for them to make money on their own at campuses. Is there, services with doing marketing for a car dealership? There's all these resources out there that players can get involved in, but it can't take away from the goal of getting on the floor, competing, being productive, and help your team win.
All right, so we mentioned Kansas. They've been active in the transfer portal as well. Zeke Mayo and also AJ Storr.
Yep.
Headlining right now with what they've been able to come up with. Tell us how those two fit in with what Bill Self wants to do.
Yeah, I think Kansas got, in my opinion, the best transfer that was out there available in AJ Storr.
Ooh.
I love AJ Storr. I'm a big fan. Loved him at Wisconsin. He is a hooper. He is a total gamer. He has that edge to him. He's an athletic, strong, physically gifted wing that can handle the ball, that can get his own shot. His 3-point percentage dipped this year. That is the biggest thing, I think, because Kansas needs to identify shooting, and every team needs to identify shooting. But his ability to score the ball, his ability to get to the free throw line, he does need to get better in certain areas. He's wired to score it. He embraces physicality. I think the Big 12 will be a good league for him. I think Coach Self's system will be good for him. He's got to improve his passing ability. He's got to improve his rebounding. I think defensively, he's got so much ability, and I think it's what's great is he's going to Kansas, and he needs Kansas. Like, he needs Coach Self. He needs that teaching, particularly in some of these other areas outside of just scoring. But he can score it, and he is a very talented kid, about 6'7", 200 pounds, just strong, lean, very explosive, and just the ability to score it around the rim and his ability to create separation and get his own shot is really impressive. So Kansas fans should be very excited about AJ. Just a great fit, great commitment there because he is a tough dude and can score it. Zeke Mayo, shooting. That really is what jumped out. He's one of the better shooters in the portal. Comes from South Dakota State, and he played pretty much point, but he's a scoring point when he was at South Dakota State. I definitely think he'll be more kind of off the ball combo-ish, playing off DeJuan Harris. Decent passer, but he's a scorer and a shooter. That's the biggest thing. He shot close to 40% from three. Very efficient shooter, good with shot selection, can shoot it off the catch, shoot it off the bounce, shoot it off movement. Like there's a lot of things there. When you talk about Kansas identifying shooting, identifying a guy that has extended range, Zeke Mayo's that guy. And that was such a good fit and a good get for Bill Self and his staff.
And so what else you think Kansas is looking for?
Well, I think the biggest thing is what was made last year of their team is bench and depth. And yeah, they got solid recruiting class coming in. I think adding another versatile forward big that can come off the bench, I think is important. Obviously, they have KJ and they have Hunter, who will be back and kind of being that 4-5 piece to it, but having maybe a 4 that can come in and maybe play both positions, or a big that can stretch the floor a little bit. Zach Clements was really good, kind of a player to watch for in terms of his development. I'm kind of curious where that goes. But I think just ultimate depth there. And you can't have enough shooting, so I'm sure they're still looking at that. But the recent decommit that you were talking about opens up a roster spot. I'm just kind of curious what they do with that. But they've been, very much active. There's no doubt about it. They have been on the trail, trying to get into the portal, and definitely, looking at different guys that fit, that can play for Coach Self, that understand what it means to go to Kansas and wear, that Kansas on the front of your jersey and playing in Allen Fieldhouse every night. Sometimes that's not for everybody. Sometimes those mid-majors that come up to a level like that is a totally different adjustment at different times. So trying to find guys that have that kind of edge and fearlessness, Zeke and AJ definitely have that.
All right. What about K-State? Doug McDaniel was a big get. What do they get with Doug McDaniel?
Yeah, Doug McDaniel, undersized guard. So K-State will be familiar with that. He's about 5'11", if that. A little wiry guard, but super quick twitch, handle, can get to different spots on the floor, can play in pick and roll. Very tough for defenders to keep in front. Like, he's got really shifty ability to get into the paint and make plays. He can shoot it. Really had a great year at Michigan, even though they really struggled. But the thing that's kind of overrated with him, he's a very good passer. Like, he's known to score it. He can shoot the ball. The rim finishing can be a struggle just because of his size, but his ability to make shots, he's got quick trigger, so he can put the ball on the floor, get to a step back or a side step, and get his shot off quickly. He's got extended range. Shot selection will be important. That's something he probably needs to clean up a little bit in terms of seeing more playmaking, because he's a very good passer. Like, he can do some things, and I think that is what maybe he was looking for. Michigan really struggled. They didn't really have enough around him. A lot was just usage where he just had to go make something happen out of nothing. And I think it'll be a little bit better fit for him with Coach Tang, maybe putting some pieces around him and see what he can do. But really, really productive player and a great get for Kansas State, and a great player to come to the Big 12. You're talking another AJ Storr from Wisconsin, Big 10 player, and then we talked about Tony Perkins, Big 10 player at Mizzou, and here's another Big 10 guard coming to the Big 12 and going to Kansas State. And I think it's all in all the way Coach Tank plays, the way he's showcased smaller guards. I think that's something to really look for with Doug. I think he's got a chance to be really good.
All right, staying with the Big 12, the defending champs, Houston. If not for injury, they could have been a factor in the Final Four, and perhaps maybe that was the team that could have given UConn a run for their money if they're fully healthy. But then again, maybe no one could have handled UConn. But you love a pickup that Kelvin Sampson gets down at Houston because, look, this Big 12, I know Kansas is – I've seen some way too early preseason top 25 rankings that has Kansas number 1. Hey, Arizona's coming.
Yep.
You got Houston that is establishing themselves as one of the best programs right now in the nation. What did Houston do that you love?
I love the get of Milo Suzan out of Oklahoma. He is a guard that was in the transfer portal. Very talented combo guard. Has, I would say, struggled a little bit, first 2 years. Not a bad player in terms of his production, but a player that just really hasn't kind of grown his game with the production, but very talented, like very skilled. And I think it's a good fit. And I said this earlier, when you talk about like AJ Storr needs Kansas, I think Milo Suzan needs Houston. He needs Kelvin Sampson. I think that for number one, toughness for sure, being able to play with physicality, and then ultimately having the ball in his hands with the ability to play off of, we'll see what comes back to Houston in terms of, what shooters are around Milo Suzan, because I think he's a very good point guard that's kind of been in this tweener phase where is he a 1, is he a 2? And he's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit. I think it's a good fit in terms of how he will play in Houston's system with Coach Sampson. Obviously, Jamal Shed is leaving, going to the draft, which has been the program at Houston. He's been the guy. And so big shoes to fill. But Milos is a very talented kid. He stays in the league. He stays in the conference. And I'm really curious to see if he can take a jump with Coach Sampson because he has ability. Everybody knows about him. He was a very talented kid coming out of high school. And I think it's a really good fit in terms of what not only Houston needed a guard like him that can play point, that can do some things off the bounce, that has upside, that has potential. He does need to get stronger. And Houston has done a great job of developing those type of players. So I'm really curious to see how this goes.
What's Shed in the NBA?
Well, I think he's helped himself tremendously. I think in terms of this draft and knowing NIL now, the big talk in the draft, and I know Brett Veach actually talked about this in his presser in terms of the NFL and just how the draft's going to work now with players that can go back to school. I think the NFL is finally seeing that. We saw this last year of players that put their name in on our side and get feedback, and they have eligibility left. They can pull their name and withdraw their name, and in many cases, they know that their range with the feedback they get, maybe they're mid to late second round. Maybe they're undrafted. They go back to school. They can make money off NIL. In Jamal Shed's case, it's time for him to go. Like he's proven enough. We'll see where he ends up. There's a lot to be decided on that in terms of draft range. The NBA Combine's coming up. Draft workouts will begin. He'll interview off the chart, just high level individual toughness, winner, competes, knows who he is, heart and soul of Houston basketball, and every team's going to love him. And, I kind of think about Javon Carter when he was at West Virginia, like kind of similar story to that. Jamal's just a strong, buck strong defender, but showed he could make shots this year and showed he could score it, which was the biggest thing he had to show. And he really helped himself and he's put himself in a good position for the draft.
Speaking of the NBA, earlier this week, in back-to-back games on TNT, there were a couple of wild, fantastic finishes, good enough to where the next day you keep watching the replays, the highlights, the replays of the last minute or so, and you just can't get enough of it. Number one, for the crowd reaction, the announcers, Kevin Harlan on one game, Mike Breen on the other, and just how stunning both of the final minutes were in these games. We'll start with, I couldn't wait to talk to you about what happened between the 76ers and the Knicks. 76ers have a 5-point lead, under a minute left, and they give up a three that bounces around the rim and goes in, and then they can't get the ball in bounds, and Nurse is calling a timeout that apparently everyone in the world sees, but the official, and so then they can't get the ball in, and there's a loose ball, looks like a foul, and of course the Knicks come up with it. DiVincenzo missed a three, then they got it back, and then he hits a three, and just like that, a 5-point lead evaporates. So first of all, it's like, what the hell happened with the timeout?
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. For Nurse and just Philly, just because they got to get the timeout there. Timeouts are essential in the NBA because of, you can extend the timeout. Just having those timeouts late is so critical in playoff games, and you want to be able to use those. And I think sometimes you see it in a lot of different, especially in football. Like sometimes a coach will be signaling timeout, and maybe he's saying it, but he's not getting the attention of the official. And let's be honest, the atmosphere in MSG was off the chart.
But did he not see it? Did he not grant it? Like, what was
I don't know if he heard it and didn't see it. That's how I took it. Because obviously, if a coach and the ball hasn't been inbounded, even if you see it and the ball gets, you can still call the timeout and they can grant the timeout. But yeah, he just didn't see it, I don't think. So that's what I think the timeout was. But what's funny too, Steven, the three, like that 5-0 run, but really it goes back to Jalen Brunson getting one of the best bounces you'll see on a corner three. That would have
pissed me off so bad if I was a 76er. Like, are you serious?
And Jalen Brunson really struggled. I mean, he went 8 for 29, and he was 1 for 6 from three. And the 1-3 he makes hits a rim, bounces up in the air, and just drops in. And that really started it. And then they got the turnover.
And the Sixers have had some god awful playoff losses of the past couple of years. Have. Some just soul crushing playoff losses. We have a guy named Jeff Kerr that comes on the show. He's based in Philadelphia, and he covers all the Philadelphia teams. And he tweeted this whole list of and remember the Kawhi shot. Remember how that ended the series, right?
All timer.
But absolutely. All these different things, and it sounded like me, in the '90s talking about the Chiefs in the playoffs.
Yeah,
like he said it's almost like I'm numb to it now. Yeah. Like when we're waiting to see what horrific way the 76ers are going to lose. But even that one was almost over the top. Like, are you kidding me?
It's Marcus Mariota catching his own pass and going, that's really what it's just the crazy stuff. But, I think with a game like this, it's a good reminder of, it doesn't matter if it's high school, if it's college, if it's the NBA, closing a game in a hostile environment, that is, I don't think Philly really did what they were supposed. They weren't strong with the ball. Basic things you teach, hey, you're gonna get pressure here. Take care of the ball. Value the ball.
Crowd is on. That is on.
It is on. You're in a hostile environment. Gotta get the ball across. It's an 8-second time.
Chris Rock yelling at you. Yeah, it's a different deal.
And then obviously Embiid's comments after the game make this series even more intriguing when he's like, "We're the better team," and I love what he's saying because he's trying to take the leadership piece to his team. That's a gut-wrenching loss. That is a rough loss to go down 0-2, and Lakers are the same way, obviously. But how you rebound from that, understanding Philly had every chance to win that game and should have won that game. And Embiid looked fairly good. A lot was made of his knee after game one, and he was able to kind of power through that and looked okay. And they had a chance to really even out the series. Tyrese Maxey's incredible. I have to say that. He's off the chart, most improved player in the NBA this year. Dynamic scorer. He was sick, had an IV, played through that, and was absolutely fantastic in this game. And the reason why they traded James Harden, they knew Tyrese Maxey was the next dude in line, and they knew he was a star, and he's definitely showing that.
And then the other game that was the second half of that doubleheader was the Lakers Nuggets. The Lakers had the 20-point lead. You got LeBron blaming all kinds of elements and other things after the game. Throwing, the Lakers will throw people under the bus and find a way to blame others for a loss. But man, watching that game again, it always goes back to Michael Porter Jr. and what we missed out on, what he could have been if he was healthy at Mizzou. But that three that he hit that tied the game with two defenders converging on him on the quick pass, and he had to hurry up and have a quick release and nailed it and tied the game. That was such a memorable moment. And then, I mean, dude, Jamal Murray is like, and Anthony Davis. You wait for moments like that in the NBA, right? And I'm listening to the announce crew. He's got to hurry. He's got to hurry. And you see what he's doing.
Yeah.
And you see, and that fadeaway,
It's pretty.
nothing but net. And I saw a beautiful picture that a photographer took of AD like fully extended with his fingertips out there and the ball being released. What a shot! What a moment! A true buzzer beater. And now what's that? 10 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
The Nuggets that they beat the Lakers. That you talk about another gut wrenching loss. Boy, what a baller finish in Jamal Murray.
Yeah,
you know,
and like so much of the playoffs, especially late game and close games, is can you identify a switch? Like, can you identify a switch? And you know, AD's been excellent in these first two games. Like, he's been so good. And right there, like Jamal, it looked like a double drag to me. It might have just been, you know, kind of sort of a weave action they were running, and they're able to get him to a strong side. And you can just kind of see it coming. I thought the play was perfect because they cleared out the side. It was just empty. And he was able to get to a step back. And it's a good defense. It was just better offense. And that's what the NBA is. It's a shot-making league. Like, sometimes great offense beats great defense. And so much, though, is matchups and switches and, you know, trying to get the ball in your best player's hands, trying to get that player to his spot. How do defenses play that? And Jamal, I'm sure the Lakers are probably kicking themselves now looking at it like, man, he got a pretty good shot, and it's a step-back fadeaway, but it's in space. You know, it's in the mid-range, which Jamal is a very good mid-range shooter, and it's going to a strong side. And he hits a big shot. But to your point, Michael Porter was excellent. To have 22 points, 9 rebounds on 13 shots, like 62% from the field and 60 from three in a playoff game. They needed every bit of those points, especially in the comeback. And you know, again, championship DNA. This is what the Denver Nuggets do. The Lakers played probably their best game I've seen them play in this span of Denver winning all these games. It's the best they played. And they couldn't get it done. That's tough because now you got to regroup and rebound. You know, D'Angelo Russell was very good in this game. I think it's a positive for the Lakers to take. So much is made of him in the playoffs. He's got to be a shot maker, and he hit 7 threes for LA and really kind of kept them afloat, and really was a big reason why the Lakers were able to get a 20-point lead. But no lead is safe in the NBA, and no lead is safe against Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets either.
And overall, you know, it's been super exciting so far in the playoffs, but it's also, you know, we're so dependent on the stars being healthy.
Yeah.
And there's no bigger star than Giannis, and you want him to be healthy, and you want him to come back. You want Embiid. I mean, I don't care unless you're a Knicks fan, you want Embiid to stay healthy to see that series play out. And so many times that's been an issue for the 76ers. But what about Giannis in this Bucks and Pacers series? Because, I mean, look, he's still one of, if not the best players in the NBA, and you got to get him healthy if you have a chance. If you want to have a chance, if you're the Bucks.
Absolutely. Especially just, again, I just touched on matchups, and you know, Pascal Siakam was great in game 2 to get Indiana that win. Damon Lillard has been playoff Dame time for sure, has shown up in the first 2 games. But in playoff series, you have to have 3 guys that can score the ball. You got to have 3 guys that consistently, you know, give you production. And I think right now with the Bucks, like, you know, Chris Middleton has been solid. They were able to get great play from Brook Lopez, who hit 6 threes. But there's no question they're just missing Giannis on both ends of the floor and everything he brings. I think this is probably a little bit of a different series if he's healthy. But the good news is Milwaukee was able to take game 1 and play really well. But there's so much pressure now on Dame and definitely Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton. Like, those guys have to be at a high level. But when you flip the script and you look at Indiana, it's a great win for them because of Pascal Siakam playing well. And they're getting really good production from Miles Turner and Tyrese Halliburton. You know, he had 12 and 12, and you know, Tyrese Halliburton, I'm kind of waiting for him to take off too in this series because he's been good, but Tyrese Halliburton can be elite, and if that's the case, then the series, I think, really sways towards Indiana. Like Tyrese has been really good. I think he should be more aggressive a little bit in terms of finding his offense and scoring to take a little bit of pressure off everybody else. But, when you look at Indiana, like they're not afraid of this Bucks team, and I think they're a confident group that they can pull this off, especially with Giannis out. They're trying to take the most of the opportunity. 1-1, interesting series there to follow.
Now you love the Mavs and the Clippers series, don't you?
Love it. Yeah, there's a lot of good series. I mean, the West is just incredible. When you look at these matchups, Minnesota is up 2-0 on Phoenix, but it's still Book, Beal, and KD, and that's an interesting series to watch for. But the Mavs and the Clippers, and I'll know, lots made of Kawhi right now with him coming back, playing in game 2. He's still trying to get his wind in terms of his conditioning because he's been out for so many games. But you look at this series and just the players that are in this series, right? James Harden, Kyrie, Luka, Kawhi, PG. Like there's just so many good
basketballs
players.
In this.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so much there. You look at Russ and Norman Powell, who's one of my favorite, six man in the league. Great off the bench player. But Dallas and Luka last night, like man, like they knew they needed it. They had to get game 2. This could be that series that goes 7. That's why I love it so much. Is I really think it depends on the night, the adjustments. Can Kawhi get healthy enough where he can take over a game? Can Dallas do some things that doesn't just involve Luka and Kyrie? Can Tim Hardaway be a factor? Tim got a little banged up there. There's just, it's such an interesting, dynamic with the matchup because both these teams are so dangerous and can beat anybody. And, here they are matched up against one another. I just think it's a really fascinating series that could go 7 easily.
We covered a lot of ground in this episode.
We did,
didn't we?
It's fun. It's fun to have these playoffs and just like I don't want to take anything away from the East because there's some good matchups in the East for sure, like we've touched on. But the Western Conference is just it's every single series. It could go either way, just depending on the night. And like to what you said, Giannis, his health situation, Embiid, and I want my boy Zion coming back.
That's right.
I hope he can get back we can make it a series and be fun with Pels and OKC.
Yeah, especially if you don't have a team, in the city. For most Kansas City fans, you want to see the best players that are out there playing in these matchups. You want Zion, you want Embiid, you want Giannis, and hopefully they'll all get healthy and ready to roll, and we'll see some fantastic, some epic performances in the NBA playoffs. All right, tell people who make this wonderful podcast possible. I know that we got to go down to Charlie Hustle.
I was just about to say.
Where's my gear at? Let's go.
Gear time. We got to get there.
Where's my NIL?
We got a lot of, Charlie Hustle's released a lot of the new Royals gear I'm seeing around town. So big thank you to Charlie Hustle, everybody over at Charlie Hustle that make this possible. Couldn't do it without you. And then everybody over at Capital Investment Management as well that are our sponsor this year. Really excited to have them on board. And thank you for all you do as well.
This has been another fine episode of the House of Hustle. That's Jarrett Sutton. I'm Stephen St. John. Until next time, remember, Kansas City is for hustlers.